have a really exciting opportunity that was brought to us as a district, an opportunity to really look at MTSS and supporting our youngest readers, first and second graders. So we've got our research gurus here that are going to provide some insight into what this program is, to see if you are interested in being a part of this grant-funded opportunity, this research study to provide some support in reading for our first and second graders at your sites. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Anya Kirky. She is the director of the research study, and then she also has some other researchers with her. Mary Jo Taylor and Cheryl Shear are also here as well. So just a heads up, we are recording for those that are not here today, just in case you're wondering why the cameras are on. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it on to Anya, and thank you all for being here.
Well, thank you so much, Julie. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for taking time from your busy days. I know how hard it is to come to these meetings, so I greatly appreciate you being here present today with us. So my name is Anya Kirky, as Julie said, and I'm actually from American Institutes for Research, which is the main contractor for this contract with the U.S. Department of Education. So I'm here on the behalf of U.S. Department of Education to tell you more about this opportunity. We have been working with the district folks for a while about this study and whether this would be a good match for your district to participate in. The study is, of course, absolutely voluntary. So we are here really to just kind of see if you would be interested in study participation and giving you that extra information so you can make an informed decision, okay? And as Julie mentioned, this study is about multi-tiered systems of support for reading, or MTSSR, for grades 1 and 2, right? It is a large evaluation. It is basically one of the largest evaluation studies that the U.S. Department of Education has ever conducted. It's going to include about 10 school districts all around United States and about 150 schools. So this is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really be part of something that would be also informing U.S. education policy more generally. So I hope that you guys are interested in hearing more and potentially participating in the study. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the MTSSR model as we conceptualize it. I know that you might have some activities in your school, but it's important to know what the study model would look like so you can make a good decision about your participation. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about the study design because it's really important for you to understand that this is a research study. So it comes with some caveats and some data collection and things like that that you need to be aware of before you make a decision, right? Then I'm going to talk about the eligibility and participation requirements. And I'm doing it because often we have questions about, like, why us? Why did you reach out to our districts? Why my school, you know? So I just want to kind of talk about that process in general to kind of just let you know what the process and why we have had these conversations with your school district. And then finally, of course, I also want to talk about the benefits of participation and questions and answers. And please do feel, free to ask questions while I'm presenting, and also feel really free to stop me because I have an accent and I'm a speed talker. I go fast. So if I'm saying something that is really hard to understand, please just stop me and ask for clarification. All right, so let's go forward. So why does the U.S. Department of Education want to study MTSSR at this time? I think we all know that students who are not fluent readers, pretty much by grade 3 or 4, are really going to be experiencing some very negative lifelong outcomes. We are talking about lower levels of graduating from high school. We are talking about academic problems in upper elementary grades, middle school, and high school. We are talking about mental health issues. We are talking about, lower levels of workforce participation. We are talking about really serious long-term outcomes. So it is a really, really important problem to address. Well, why MTSSR? Why are we looking at multi-tiered systems of support? Well, we know that there is some evidence for smaller scale studies that when you do multi-tiered systems of support in early grades and you intervene early and you're trying to get those kids to be fluent by grade 3, it can be effective. You can really help these kids to become fluent readers if you do multi-tiered systems of support. There is support for that. There are studies showing that, but those studies have been small scale. That's one problem. And the other problem is that, you know what? Lots of school districts are doing MTSSR, and they're doing it in early grades. And there's a lot of support for implementing this approach out there, and many, many school districts are doing it. But there is really no evidence that it is truly effective on a larger scale. So it might be the case that school districts and schools are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on a yearly basis on doing practices and having policies in place that actually might not be effective if they're not implemented really well. So the study has two goals. It's really trying to understand what does it take to do MTSSR or really improve reading instruction in the grades 1 and 2. And how much training does it take and how much support does it take to get the schools to really high level of implementation? We are really interested in understanding what does it take, because it can be really hard, and we know that schools have had some problems of implementing MTSSR. And the other thing that we are trying to understand is whether we can actually see differences in teachers' instructional practices as well as student achievement outcomes as a result of doing MTSSR in the schools. Can we really improve these outcomes as a result of doing this? So those are the two goals that the study has. All right, any questions about that? Why we are doing it? I think we all agree that it's really important to get the kids into that fluency by grade 3. So the MTSSR model that we are kind of conceptualizing for the study and we would ask the schools to implement has 4 core components. And the first one is Tier 1 instruction. And the Tier 1 instruction would be about all the 5 major reading domains: phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. And the whole idea about this study is how can we get teachers supports and training so that the teachers would be doing really high quality Tier 1 instruction in their classrooms. And that would be explicit instruction where there's lots of modeling, lots of doing things together and releasing that responsibility to the kids in the end, right? That kind of process in place, as well as plenty of data-based differentiated instruction. Something that is really like, what are the supports that are well matched to the kids based on the kids' needs? How to use the data, how to make sure that the instructional practices are really matched to the needs that the students have in the classroom. So that's the data-based differentiation piece. Then the second component is Tier 2 intervention. And we know that Tier 2 intervention is really for those kids who have been identified, again, based on data, struggling with reading. Like you have your screening measures in schools, you identify the children who struggle with reading. How do we provide those children those additional supports that really help them to progress in their reading, right? It should be supplemental. It should not be something that is taken away from the Tier 1 instruction. They should get all the Tier 1 instruction and they should get supplemental Tier 2 intervention. And it should be data-driven. Just as I said, we should use the data not just to diagnose who are the children who need additional supports, but what kind of supports should these children get as a result, right? So the third piece that we have is, surprise, surprise, then the screening and progress monitoring. This is really how to efficiently use the systems that you have in place about collecting data about student performance when it comes to reading, and how to use that data, how to analyze it, how to use that analysis that you do with the data to identify the things that those children would really benefit from, right? That's all about the screening, progress monitoring, and database decision making. And the last component that we have in this model is what we call MTSSR infrastructure. And this, frankly, is my favorite because I come from implementation science background. It is what kind of institutions and procedures you have to establish in the school so you can create a more sustainable implementation of MTSSR. It is basically establishing those school-based teams to lead it, to analyze the data, to really really coordinate all the different activities of these different components, And it also includes MTSSR coach. The study would be providing coaches. They would be working 1 day a week in your school, and those coaches would be funded by the study for 3 years. Okay? So that's the model. And the one thing that you can see right away when you're looking at this, I think, you're like, where are the Tier 3 services, right? So where are those? Well, we are not including Tier 3 intensified services in this study, and there are a few reasons, okay? This study is going to be a national evaluation, so it's very hard for us to actually work on Tier 3 supports because they're often related to special education services, and lots of different states have different regulations in place, and it would be very hard for us to work with, potentially 10 different school districts from 10 different states and make sure that we actually support the implementation of those services with high quality in each of the places. And it would be extremely expensive. So the US Department of Education basically decided, you know what, it is better if the schools keep doing their current practices and their current services when it comes to Tier 3 or intensified service production. Okay, so we don't change too many things at the same time. We don't create too much stress in the school, like revamping the whole system, because it would be very hard to do. So how we are going to get this done? So who are going to be providing those supports and trainings for your school staff so they could actually engage in the implementation of MTSSR in the 1st and 2nd grade? We held these national competitions to actually identify 2 service providers. The first one was completed in June 2019, and we selected University of Oregon Center on Teaching and Learning and Catapult Learning. And their model is called Enhanced Core Reading Instruction, or ECRI. Anyone here familiar with that? Okay. The second one, we actually just held the second competition in December and January. And because there is still some contract negotiations going on with the US Department of Education, I cannot name who the second provider is. However, it is equally qualified, I can tell you that much. University of Oregon is like the leading organization in MTSSR and reading instruction. This second provider is similarly very, very experienced. It's one of the largest reading instruction professional development provider in the country, together with another university. So some of you might actually even guess who it might be at this point. But they're both very qualified, and they have experience of working with thousands of schools and hundreds of school districts. So they are really, really, they have the capacity to do and support schools implementing this approaches. So more about the ECRI. So this is the University of Oregon model. So what would the ECRI model look like in your school? For Tier 1 instruction, what ECRI does, it provides materials for the teachers to use in their Tier 1 instruction that are mapped on your existing reading curriculum. So what is your existing reading program? Benchmark, yes, I know this. And what they would do basically, they would be looking at the benchmark reading program, and they would be developing these already made lesson plans, how to enhance benchmark advance, how to make sure that the teachers can do really explicit instruction, how they can really well differentiate, and they would be providing those lessons plans for the teachers. The teachers would also, of course, receive training about that and how to do it. But the idea is that there's this very structured way how you can help teachers to do explicit instruction in their classroom. And it doesn't have to be a lot of extra work on teachers' plate. The whole idea is that we are trying to reduce the time that teachers would be actually trying to figure out what to do with Benchmark Advance. The materials are already mapped. They can use those materials which are already prepared by University of Oregon. Okay? So the mapping is done by the provider. And what the provider is looking for, though, is about 90-minute or longer reading block, where 30 minutes would be spent on foundational skills, 30 minutes would be spent on vocabulary and comprehension, and the 30 minutes would be in differentiated small group instruction. And is your reading block 120? Yeah, I thought so. Okay. So, but it would be definitely fitting into this model. So you will have, enough in your time that you could be having this model implemented in your school. Like there's the basic, at least there's basics that we could be making to match. So ECRI Tier 2 intervention, it is a little bit different than what people typically think about ECRI Tier 2, or what people typically think about Tier 2 intervention. Typically folks kind of either buy something which is off the shelf, or they have teachers or their interventionists to use materials which might be available online. But what ECRI does, they kind of do it differently. What they say is that to help children really to be able to read in early grades, you need to align your Tier 2 intervention with the Tier 1 instruction that takes place in your classroom. So their thinking is, how can we make the Tier 1 instruction more accessible for the students? And they came up with the solution, which is, why don't we pre-teach in Tier 2 the material that the students are going to be learning in their classrooms? So there's this very close alignment. So when the students actually come to the teacher's classroom and they're hearing what is going on there, it's not the first time they're hearing that material. And they're able to basically follow and learn better as a result. Okay? But that's not all. We all know that some students might be so much behind that they might not be getting full benefits of being pre-taught the material that they're going to be facing in their classrooms. For those students who are so much behind, the ECRI does provide additional supports, additional practice, and really kind of trying to diagnose the problems that the students are facing and trying to get the Tier 2 to really match on those problems that the students have with reading. So it has these two different parts. There's the pre-teaching, but also kind of the individualization based on what the students' needs are. All right. Okay, so that was ECRI. Now this is the secret approach B that I cannot really say what it is at this point, but I probably can, like, hopefully by the end of the week, but I'm calling it approach B at this point. So the approach B is a little bit different, and this is like, the ECRI is very structured. It gives teachers this very ready-made lesson plans, and it kind of helps the teachers to that way align really good instructional practices to their core reading program. Now, approach B is a little bit different. It is more about how to make sure that teachers really understand the reading science, really understand good instructional practices when it comes to all of the 5 main reading areas, and how they could be, implementing those practices in their classroom. Even though the approach B also provides model lesson materials, they are not basically matched lesson by lesson to the benchmark advance. The teachers have more choice about which instructional practices I should use with what benchmark advance lesson. But they will have materials which are already like lessons plans, which are already done, so they have examples, but there's no one-on-one linkage between the benchmark advance and the lesson materials that the provider provides. And the other thing different about the approach B is that it would be really just following the way how the district typically structures the reading instruction in grades 1 and 2. So there's no requirement of certain amount of time spent on foundational skills, certain amount of time spent on differentiation and so on. It would be following the regular structure. The other thing how this approach B is different from ECRI is that they actually would be using off-the-shelf intervention program for Tier 2 intervention. So what they would do is to use sound partners. So whoever is actually delivering Tier 2 intervention in your schools would be getting trainings of how to use sound partners in Tier 2 intervention. Who typically delivers your Tier 2 intervention? Teachers, right. So teachers would be getting that training about how to use sound partners. Sound partners is an evidence-based program. It covers mostly phonemic awareness, phonics, and fluency. And it is actually developed to be delivered by paraprofessionals, interventionists, even parents. So it is something that teachers should be able to actually pick up pretty fluently. It is a scripted program, and it allows you to deliver these lessons in a very efficient manner. And it can be done in groups of 3 to 8 students as well. Typically, sound partners has been done as a one-on-one, but it can also be delivered in a small group format. So the approaches A and B, ECRI and this unknown approach, they do share some similarities. Their approach to screening and progress monitoring is very similar. They basically say, if you guys are using psychometrically valid screening and progress monitoring system, as you are, they will really help with that database decision making, please. How to analyze the data, how to interpret the data, how to make instructional decision making based on that data. So their training would be really, most focused on the data use instead of the data collection part. If there are any needs to really kind of understand better how the data collection can be made more efficient, how the system can be used more efficiently, they will also provide that training. But the focus will be more on how to use that data. And then finally, the other thing that they share is the infrastructure. Both of the providers will be providing supports for the school-based teams, the teams who will be coordinating the whole MTSSR in the schools and really leading that effort. And they will also train and support the district-based coaches that would be working 1 day a week in your schools. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the trainings and supports, because these are really important, right? We want to know how are we going to be able to support your teachers and your school staff. So first of all, it's important to know that the activities will start this summer, 2020. And we will start first, actually even earlier. We will start with the district with the activities related to identifying the coach. We would be basically working with the school district to identify 2 coaches, 1 for each of the providers. And those coaches would be then working with the schools. And if there are enough schools in the study, because we want there to be 1 day a week per each school. So depending on the number of schools in the study, the number of coaches would be based on that, right? Okay. They would also work with the schools to establish teams. If you do not have currently MTSSR teams in your schools for the early grades, they would help to identify folks and kind of talk about what the team responsibilities are and help the schools to kind of come up with this idea of who should be in this team, why, and what are the skills needed, and all of that stuff. They would also talk about the data and how it's currently used and assess kind of the database decision-making processes early on. And also assess some schedules, like thinking about, they're like partners. They will be there to basically think with you, how can we make this work? Do we need to adjust some schedules to make this work? How can we make this to be something that is going to be useful for everyone? And they're there to help to go through that process. So it's not just kind of put on your plate and you have to deal with it. They're there to support that whole process. So then when it comes to the training and ongoing supports that the teachers and the school staff will get, they will also start this summer. There's going to be full trainings. There's going to be a whole nother summer of full trainings. That would be the 2021 summer. And then there's going to be like limited set of trainings on the 3rd summer. And then there's also going to be supports during the school years. So 20 to 21 and 21 to 22 and 22 to 23. So 3 years of supports throughout the school years. There will be summer trainings, and these would be for the teachers and the interventionists. There will be also trainings for the MTSSR teams. During the school years, there will be site visits. The providers would come to your schools 4 times during the school year to see how things are going and actually work with your MTSSR team and overseeing the coaches to make sure that the schools have what does it take to get to the high level of implementation. How can we support you to get there? That's the whole idea here. There will be also some virtual booster trainings as needed. If your school struggles with one aspect of the model, you would be talking to the folks, and they would be the providers and your coaches, and they would be working with you. Wow, can we get some additional training on this issue that we are really struggling with? And then they would be delivering that training. And then, of course, there's going to be coach training. We are going to be identifying the coaches who will be working in the school districts, but we are also going to make sure that these coaches are actually trained and they will be able to deliver the kind of support that we expect them to be able to deliver. So about the coach is going to be supported for 3 years. And again, 1 day a week in each of the participating schools that are actually implementing the MTSSR. Okay. And there is, in your folders, there is more of a description of the models as well as the description of the supports, I guess. All right. Any questions about that? I know it's a lot of information and it's kind of like a attack. Any questions at this point? Okay, so let's move into this other part. So those are the supports, that's the model. Okay, this is the study. So you need to just know about what the study requires because you need to be aware of all of this before you can make a decision. All right, so as I said earlier, there will be only 10 school districts in the United States who can participate in the study. Okay, only 10, and this is like a unique opportunity to affect US education policy, all right, directly. We are expecting about 15 volunteering schools per district, but at least 9. The study will have 150 schools in total, and the study will be using what we call random assignment or lottery. So 50 schools will be assigned to implement the approach A, which could be the ECRI. 50 schools will be randomly assigned to implement the model B, which is the unknown mystery model. And then there are going to be 50 schools that continue to do what they're currently doing, right? You are part of the study, but you're not changing your instruction in your school. This is how it looks within a district. So if you have 12 schools participating in the district, 4 of them would not change anything. They would continue to do what they're currently doing. 4 of them would be implementing the ECRI approach, and 4 of them would be implementing the currently unknown to be determined, but I really know what it is model. All right. As a part of the study, there will also be data collection. And this is really, really important. And I know I'm a researcher, so I'm completely, totally biased here. But without the data, without collecting all of this information, we will not know whether this approach actually works or doesn't work, right? That's the reason why we have to collect. And for a study of this size and importance, we actually have limited the data collection to be as little as possible. So we are trying to reduce the burden. We don't want the teachers, we don't want the interventionists or the principals to say, this is too much. All right, so what do? We have teacher surveys. They take about 15 to 20 minutes. They're online, no big deal. And they're funny. Reading specialist surveys as well. And if your teachers are the reading specialists, they would be filling out this survey as well. We will be asking a school administrator to fill out a survey. Again, it's going to be online, 10 minutes each time. What we are also going to do is to do classroom observations. They are in 2022. We would be coming into teachers' classrooms to see if they have been able to change their instructional practices based on all the training and support and coaching that they have received, right? We would also be observing Tier 2 intervention because we would like to know if the teachers who are delivering the Tier 2 intervention are actually able to deliver it with fidelity, right? We are not there to judge anyone. We are not going to say, is this teacher doing great or not or whatever. We are there to really see if that delivery model was feasible. So we really need to see how the teachers are delivering it. And then we are going to be doing student testing. And this is something that I know schools are often concerned about. They're like, oh, how much time is this going to take? How much are the kids going to be outside the classroom? It's going to be a total of 4 hours. This is a 3-year study, okay? Total of 4 hours for the 1st and 2nd grade students. And we are going to be bringing our own assessment team to the schools. We are not asking your teachers or anyone from your school to do any of the testing. What we ask is your support to scheduling it and your support to organizing the testing in your school. But we are not asking you to do any of the work, okay? We will bring our own people who are professional assessors who will be doing the student assessment. And then there's going to be some coaching logs and some team meeting minutes that we will be collecting from the team and from the coach. And those are all going to be on a web portal. So it's going to be really minimum burden for them as well. It's just something that they can fill out really easily. And it's also multiple use, like the team meeting minutes. It's a form which is online. So basically the team can use that form as an agenda and also use it as a team meeting minutes that can be then distributed as a PDF or a Word document to the rest of the school staff as needed. Okay, so there's multiple purposes. All right, any questions about the data collection? All right, so why did we come here? Okay, why were you selected? I know people often have questions about that. So we were really looking for school districts that were large enough. We needed to have school districts that have at least 9 qualifying schools. And of course, Tucson has plenty of elementary schools. So you were kind of a natural selection for this study for that reason. Also, we were interested in schools that have interest in doing MTSSR in early grades, really improve their reading instruction in the grades 1 and 2, but are not there yet. And they might not be doing MTSS for that, but they might have started, but are struggling with the implementation. And we know how hard this is to implement and how hard it is to get the supports needed to get into the high level of implementation. So we were looking for schools that are interested in study participation, see there is a need for them to work on their first and second grade reading instruction, and see MTSSR as a potential solution. The schools should use some kind of a core reading program. I know you all use Benchmark Advanced, so that's all good. And also, we are looking for schools that are a little bit larger, like they should have at least 2 classrooms in both grades 1 and 2, and about 40 students on average on each of the grade levels. And most importantly, perhaps, after all, we really want to make sure that we go to places where there is need, right? We want to go into schools where there is a sufficient percentage of students who really struggle in reading in early grades. And we said 20%. We don't have any, upper limit. We are going to have schools in the study that have 80% of struggling readers in some of the districts, right? 80%. We're going to have some that have just 25, and anywhere in between. But the minimum requirement is we want to go into places that have at least 20% of kids really struggling. So we are going to places to address some need. Okay? And what are the requirements for participation? Those were kind of the eligibility. We are really looking to create partnerships. We're going to be here for 3 years. We would be providing supports for 3 years. There would be this relationship, built by the providers who would come to your schools. They will be your thought partners in essence. So we are looking forward to create that relationship and really having the school staff to be engaged. So what we are requiring is that the school staff would be encouraged to come to the trainings, right? We want at least 80% of the teachers to show up to the trainings. Data collection. Without the data, we will not know if this is working or not working. So we do really want the school staff to take the surveys and agree on their observations and all the rest of it. And then the random assignment. Once the random assignment is done, we cannot switch schools into different conditions, right? It's a random assignment. And sometimes, we are really concerned about what they call crossovers, that schools that are really doing the MTSSR approach that we are, helping them and training them to do, that they would somehow, help the schools that were randomly assigned to continue with their current practice. And sometimes these studies have been kind of draconian. They're kind of saying you cannot have a lot of interaction or anything like that. We are not. We know that this is really hard to do, so we don't put any restrictions for anything that you do otherwise, except we are asking that schools that are not going to be in the treatment condition, the schools that are not going to be implementing approach A, ECRI, or approach B, to be known, that they do not start really extensive MTSSR trainings when the study is ongoing. And when I mean extensive, I mean the similar kind of trainings as the schools that are implementing the models are going to receive. Coaching every week, multiple days of training during the summers, ongoing coaching supports, and ongoing provider visits during the year. So it typically does not actually affect the schools in any way. Okay? But I just want to make sure that there's this understanding that the schools in the business as usual condition cannot suddenly launch like this massive effort to do MTSS. All right, what are the benefits of participation? Well, as I said, we really are looking forward to kind of building these relationships and partnership for the 3 years to make sure that the schools can reach high level of implementation of the approach A or B. And it allows the schools to do that, first of all, without having to spend any of the district or their own resources. The study will be providing all the professional development, the coaching support, all the site visits, all the materials, everything for free, right? So that's one of the things. But this study also gives you really a unique opportunity to rethink how you want to do your grade 1 and 2 reading instruction. And if you are interested in really trying to do multi-tiered systems of support, have that thought partner to do it with. And really kind of think through every aspect of that, how you're doing it, how it's scheduled, how the data are used, how are the classroom teachers supported, what kind of instruction are we expecting to see in the classroom, how do we do tier 2 intervention, like all of those aspects in a really relatively safe environment where you have someone who is there to help you throughout that process for 3 years. It's quite unique opportunity to really rethink what you might want to do in your school in that sense. Okay? And of course, and this is what I said, it's like the public service aspect of this. Again, you have really a unique opportunity to help the policymakers in the United States to decide whether we should be putting more resources into MTSSR and really find out whether it works or doesn't work. This is a unique opportunity to be part of something that big. The other thing that I want to mention is that we do not expect anyone to be donating their time. So when teachers come to the trainings, they will be compensated. So we would be compensating teachers for their participation in the trainings using their professional development rate. And we would also be providing some incentives for the teachers to participate in data collection activities. So when they get a survey, we would ask them to fill out a survey, but we would also provide them a small incentive for that, about $20 or $25. After they finish the survey, they would be getting that incentive, right? We are also going to be working with a district coordinator who is going to be compensated by the study, so that it's not our study team who is going to be sending you endless emails about this and that and blah, blah, blah. But we are going to have one person, hopefully, in the district who can coordinate the study activities with us. So we will lessen the burden to the schools. You will be getting emails from a person that you know, first of all. And you will be able to work with a one-person contact in the district to make sure that all the trainings, for instance, are scheduled, the coaching schedules. If there are issues with the coaching, you can always contact your district person, and then we can work with the district person to make sure that things get fixed. So we are trying to make this as easy as possible for you to participate in as well and lessen that burden. So that's why we have basically funded, or we are going to be funding and giving some funding to someone in the district to help us to coordinate this whole effort, right? And then finally, if we are allowed, there is also some funding for a person in the school to help us to coordinate all the data collection. That basically means the observations and the student testing. A person who could be working with us, so it doesn't have to be the principal, it could be someone that you delegate to this, and we would be working with that person closely to make sure that we are there at the right time, the right day, everybody is aware that this data collection is going to happen and so on. So we are just trying to make this really kind of coordinated effort, and there's no surprises. That's the most important thing. All right, there got to be lots of questions. Even though it's like a major attack of information, it's never enough. So you probably have plenty of questions about things that you find unclear. Yes?
If you're one of the schools that gets assigned to business as usual, do you still have to do all the data collection?
Yes. Yeah, you do. But again, I promise, we have done this at least 50 years. We pay a lot of attention to the burden, and we try to make it as easy as possible, especially for the schools that are in the business as usual condition, because you don't really get the benefit of the training, right? So we don't want to burden your teachers or your staff otherwise unnecessarily. So we do the minimum that we can. Yes?
I'm sure you discussed this, but just so that I have it clear in my head, and Julie, you might help with this because some of our sites have MTSS facilitators on site and some have just a lead, so it's a teacher who leads the process. Does that affect those positions?
So when we were looking at eligibility for schools, we looked at schools that had either an MTSS facilitator or a CSP. And so our thought was the data collection liaison that would be having that extra compensation, they would be like our contact point of that school to support. So it's either the MTSS facilitator or the CSP could be that person that's going to help oversee and with the data collection. So it's not going to change, I mean, it's not going to take away or change their role, but it'll just be one added component.
So then, if we were selected, not a business as usual school, but one or the other, if we have a facilitator, that would ensure that they would stay with us for those 3 years.
Heidi? That is
Well, those are definitely factors that we always look at when we look at schools and assignments and so forth. So I can't imagine that a school participating in MTSSR would have their MTSS facilitator or CSP taken away. That's what you're asking me.
Yeah, and here I think it's really important from the study point of view, so I'm just going to step in here to really understand that we are really focusing on first and second grade. So the study staff and the study supports that really come to the schools that are going to be doing the approach A or B are really focused on those grade levels. So it's great if you have someone else in your school, like an MTSSR facilitator or a contact person who can also help us with, you know, some of the data collection activities. But they can also then perhaps even, you know, focus more on the other grade levels, because we are really trying to boost that first and second grade, and we are really needing those teams and the infrastructure that I was talking about to take place in that first and second grade. Okay.
That being said, Ernest just reminded me, I mean, if that entire position was eliminated from TUSD,
we get that.
But so is the expectation then that if you have an MTSS facility, let's just say, is this the second team that's doing the MTSSR? Or is it wrapped into the...
You know, that is something that I want the providers to work with you, and that's why I want them to have these conversations with you, like what works best for your school and what kind of structure makes most sense. If there is an existing team, but that team cannot like really focus clearly on the first grade reading, because there's a difference in the elementary, lower and upper elementary reading instruction and all of that. And we are really targeting the early grades. So we want there to be a team that really focuses on the early grades. Now, if the school has, let's say, already PPIS in place, you also deal with behaviors, or you have SEL, MTSS, you know, model in your school, it would be really important to have those conversations of how these different teams and how these different people kind of cooperate and work together, and if there is like just too much overlapping structures and all of that. But the providers who have done this with thousands and thousands of schools are the most qualified, or at least much, much more qualified than I am, to really address that question. And they would be having these conversations with each of the school to make sure that whatever team structures we create really match and are not like one more thing on your plate team structure, but a team structure that actually fits into school's current practices.
So I have a question, and maybe to you or maybe to Heidi. When you have such a small staff, and we're looking at, I'm going to say, a different team, but you really don't have the team because you don't have the staff, because they're on the discipline team, they're on the leadership team, they're on the MTSS team, we're teamed out. What do we do?
So looking at the study and the providers in TUSD, what would make more sense is to utilize our existing MTSS team. I know many of our teams also filter through maybe the PLC structure. So I know at Howell, the MTSS facilitator would have The team is the second grade team with other supports, the counselor, the admin. So that would be that second grade team to identify their data with the MTSS facilitator. And so utilizing that model and furthering it, but looking at our staff, we would definitely take that into consideration into what's going to work best for your site. So you're going to be a big part of the structure and what you feel is going to be best for how you want to facilitate it at your site.
Yes, please.
I have a question, not for the teams, but my question is about what is going to look like the day of instruction for the teacher. So I know you have it broken down into these components. So the teacher will be trained to teach in those components?
Yes.
Yes.
So they will be still following Benchmark Advance. If your teachers are using Benchmark Advance, that is their core reading program, right? And they will have those daily lessons and what they need to do. What this study really does is enhance the implementation of that Benchmark Advance. So it will give the teachers additional tools to do that reading program better. So the ECRI model gives them really concrete tools, like they're really lesson plans, like this is a better way of teaching what you're supposed to be teaching today, right? It's that specific.
Is it a scripted culture?
Yeah, it is. It is. So it will be really telling them exactly today for phonics instruction, your program says this. Here are another set of materials that actually helps you to do that specific instruction that you're supposed to be doing today, but doing it more explicitly. And here are the materials how to do it. So it's that really that explicit and that matched for the ECRI. For the other approach, it's more like here is the knowledge that you need, and here is the coach who is supporting you to put that knowledge into practice. And you're still teaching the Benchmark Advanced Reading Program, but you're getting these supports to do it better, and you're able to identify what are the holes and shortcomings of the program, where is it not that strong, and where can I improve my instruction, and really use that knowledge that you learn and that coach support to do that.
Now, are there feedback forms that we're going to use, or as principals, if we're observing or watching this lesson, who's going to provide feedback to the teacher of oh, you're doing great, or oh, you need to do better in this, or is there a feedback form? Or?
Yeah, there is going to be the coach, which is the coach who's going to come into your school once a week for 1 day. Right? They are going to be providing some of that feedback to the teachers. There's also going to be the foresight visits done by the providers, and they will be observing teachers in the classroom so they can kind of give them more of that meta-level feedback about how their instruction is looking and that kind of feedback. Of course, we would make the kind of forms that they use available if you want to do classroom walkthroughs, right? So you would be having access to those forms, so you could also encourage the teachers to do that implementation. Mm-hmm.
Is there any kind of data that shows if you start this program, kids should be at this point by September, or kids should be at this point, but is there any
I think that is that's an awesome question, because it comes to the idea of how do you use screening and progress monitoring data, right? So you would be basically getting that data, and you would be basically saying, okay, the kids is here. Where do we hope that the kids would be in the future? And they will be helping you to deal with that question of database decision making, how to use the data that you currently get to create those benchmarks where you would hope the students to be, right? When it comes to kind of research evidence, is this effective? Right. Yes, ECRI has been shown to be effective. So there is basically research that shows that, if you do this ECRI model in your classrooms with the teachers, and you do this tier 2 intervention, and you analyze the data, you can actually improve student reading outcomes. That evidence exists. For the second approach, if you're looking at the tier 2 intervention especially, which is the sound partners, which is really helping the kids who are behind and struggling readers, there are at least 7 studies that have shown an effect. That program is really, when it's implemented well in the schools, it's really able to help the students to achieve better. So that's how we put this together. We are trying to find the best possible models that we can go out here in the school districts and ask schools to try them out. Because we are really trying to figure out, if we do this in a large scale, provide the schools the training and the support and the materials and the approach, all of those things together, this should work, right? And we are really trying to find out if it works. And if it doesn't work, it is going to be shocking, right? And it's going to be really, really important finding because, again, thousands of school districts are engaged in doing this. The problem is there are often not enough supports to do it really well. And what we are doing here is we are providing those supports and trainings to do it really well, so your schools can really benefit from this approach. And we want to know if it works when you're doing it really well. So we are so invested in doing it so well that we are going to be definitely providing all the training and supports that you need. And talking about our role, as my role in this study, is really to be there as a person who helps to make that connection between the provider, who are really doing the trainings and helping your schools and the district. So if there are any issues with the level of supports you get, the quality of supports you get, the quality of the coaching support, and all of that, then I'm going to be the bad cop. It's hard to believe, but I am. So I will be the bad cop, and I will step in at that point when I hear that information that things are not going well. And we will work with the district, we will work with your school, and we will work with the provider to make sure that your schools and your staff is going to get the best supports available that they currently are for getting this done. And that's where this is a unique opportunity because there are a lot of trainings out there and there's no oversight, whether they're good or bad. Here we have a systematic way of providing trainings and oversight of the training quality and those supports and the cooperation with the district. It's like a full package, and this should be making it possible for your staff to learn and get this done really, really well. Yes, please.
So if you volunteer for the study, when would you find out which group you are to notify your first and second grade teachers, because they're going to be involved in some trainings and things like that as well?
Absolutely, that's a perfect question, and that is something that we are working with the district. There's an official process that we have to go through, with, including research applications and memorandum of understanding. There might even need to be board approval. Once we have the memorandum of understanding signed, and when we know that there are enough volunteering schools and all of that, we can do the random assignment right away. We understand that not all teachers can come to the trainings because people do vacation plans, right? They're going to be out, there are going to be reasons, people are going to be ill, whatever it is. What we hope that there's going to be enough people showing up into the trainings, about 80%, and then those who cannot come to the trainings, with the help of the coach, can really bring up to the speed. So it's not a horrible thing if some teacher misses a training. We of course want everybody to be there. However, we are realistic when we know it's not going to happen. Okay?
Where are the trainings?
They're going to be here, not necessarily here, but they're going to be at the district. We don't ask anyone to travel. We are trying to make it easy. We will bring our trainers here, so they will do the trainings here. Any other questions? Yes, please.
So the trainings are very specific for the ECRE, but what if you're in the not business as usual, but the other one?
Okay, great. The training model is about the same in a sense that they get the similar frequency and similar amount of training. It's just that the content is slightly different because the focus is different. The one thing I totally forgot to mention is in the second approach, actually, because it is less scripted, right? The teachers don't get these exact lesson plans. And it requires more as a result from the teachers to actually be doing it really well. They will get a little bit more training. So they actually will have access to an online training system. It is basically providing content information about the approach that they want to do, about good quality reading instruction, but it also will have online resources available for the teachers throughout the whole study. Yes?
If we have a reading interventionist, would the reading interventionist be going through, or could they be going through training?
Yes, so excellent question. We would love to have your reading interventionist. We are trying to really have the best possible support structure in the school and all the necessary people who need to be trained, right? So your reading interventionist are welcome to come to the trainings, and we would actually rather expect them to be there. And the other thing is, like, if your reading interventionist is not part of the tier, the MTSSR team, it might be even good for them to at least be aware of what the team does and be part of that as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. More questions?
All right, well, I want to thank everyone to respect your time. It is 5 o'clock, and I do thank you, Anya, for being here.